unzählige Male nach. Wir werden Zeit loben. Wir sind nicht allein. Die Phase der Rückkehr der Götter steht kurz bevor.
Hallo und herzlich willkommen auf meinem YouTube-Kanal. Wir sind nicht allein. Abonnieren Sie den Kanal, aktivieren Sie die Glocke und verpassen Sie keine neuen Videos über Erich von Däniken, die Paläozetie, Präastronautik, Mysterien und ungelöste Rätsel der Geschichte. Folgen Sie mir auf Facebook und Instagram, denn wir sind nicht allein.
Great to meet you in your home country, Eric. Perhaps we'll start the grand title father of ancient alien theory. 35 plus books now, Eric. Chariots of the God, of course, started this all off, plus the feature-length film. 45 plus years, Eric. A wave and a storm of controversy from day one. However, we fast forward to Ancient Aliens TV series today, the wave of controversy has perhaps been reignited. Perhaps tell us about the first era when this all started and where we are today.
I like to say how it started first.
Wow.
I was educated as a strict Catholic, and I was for 6 years in a Swiss boarding school led by Jesuits. Of course, when I was a 16 years old boy, God was for me the greatest thing whatever existed in the universe. I never had a definition of God. I still don't have one. But whatever God was in my mind as a young man, God had to be omnipotent, means all over. God would never need a vehicle in which to move around from point A to point B. Or of course, God would be out of time. I mean, God would not need to make an experiment and then he has to wait what the result is. He would do it in advance and so on. So God had to have some qualities. Now in my boarding school, we translated parts of the Bible, Greek to Latin, Latin to German. And I learned that this God of the Bible did not have my minimum qualities. So I was confused and I had doubts in my own Catholic education. And I simply wanted to find out if other communities in antiquity, if they have similar stories as we learned it in our Christian or Jewish traditions. That's the starting point. Now, I was in a boarding school. From my family, we came from the hotel business. So after my boarding school, I simply went into a hotel business. I was a waiter, I was a cook, I was sitting at the reception desk, etc. And when I wrote Chariots of the Gods, I was the managing director of a first-class hotel in Switzerland, in Davos. Then it started all. Now, just remember, a hotel manager, which earlier was simply a waiter, created a storm of controversy with Chariots of the Gods. I knew I was sitting on some sort of volcano, but I did not expect such a controversy worldwide. In the meantime, I'm 80 years old. The situation has changed a little.
Yeah. The questions that you asked originally are still as important and still as true today, Eric. And I guess the only difference is today, there's a lot more people researching the subject. Are you happy with that? Do you welcome that? Do you see room for more growth?
I am very, very happy. Most of the authors worldwide who publish in the same direction, I know them, not all of them. And they are brilliant and wonderful personalities who try to find out part of the truth of our past. Let me make clear one little point. The basic story is thousands of years ago, when our forefathers were still primitive Stone Age people, some extraterrestrials arrived. Our Stone Age people had no idea of technology, so they believed erroneously that these visitors are some gods. Of course, we all know that there is nothing like gods, but that was the misunderstanding of our Stone Age forefathers. The so-called gods, they behaved themselves like ethnologists would do today. They learned a few languages, they studied a few tribes. One day they disappeared, but with the promise to return in the far future. And this was the base of religion.
In that respect, archaeology, I don't want to make fun of archaeology, but I think a lot of archaeology, when they can't understand something, they just use the label mythology. And that's a major, major problem, Eric. Maybe talk about the problem with, quote, mythology as a label and where that fits into things.
of course, mythology exists all over the world. Every tribe had its mythology. Every great religion has its mythology today. By the way, I do not contradict, in a way, archaeology. I love the archaeologists. The one I know are brilliant and integral personalities with a lot of humor. I do not say, for example, it was the gods who created the Great Pyramid. It was the gods, the extraterrestrials, who made these gigantic temples. It was always the humans who did it. The question is, why? Then the answer from the conservative side is, they did it for the gods. I agree. Which gods? Normal, the gods are seen in nature. Our Stone Age people, they do not understand the lightning flashing down from the sky. They could not understand the thundering behind the lightning. They were afraid of an earthquake, or maybe of the sun and the moon who disappeared one time and then it's up in the sky again. So they could not understand these things. It was normal that the first religion were natural religion. I fully agree with archaeology in this sense. The question is, one day the skies obviously opened and some beings descended. How can you make a difference between natural religion and these extraterrestrial? I mean, in natural religion, you have thunder, lightning, loud noise, etc. Because the ones who descended from the sky were teaching. Information was given, and often scientific information. So these teachers, for example, they told our forefathers how the calendar works, that our planet is surrounding the sun in 365 days, etc. So information from above has come to us, and nature does not speak, does not give scientific information.
In that respect, Derek, and I know you come from that Swiss Catholic background, there's a lot of biblical information that you tackle, and then there's a lot of archaeological information that you tackle, and you sometimes see the boundaries where they both cross.
Of course.
Tell us, first of all, the doubts as a Swiss Catholic, and some of those
excuse me, what?
Doubts that you had. The doubts as a Swiss Catholic, that the questions. Send me some of those specific questions that you asked yourself when you were younger.
Questions that I still ask myself today?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know where they have come from, which distance, which solar system. I don't know what was the reason. Why have they come here? But I know they were here and they promised to return.
Do you think then stories like Moses and that is referring to not the true creation God, but perhaps a different God?
Definitely. Moses was not talking to the real, omnipotent God, whatever God is. You see, in the Bible, we have a lot of these controversies. Just take Moses. Before the Lord of the Bible descends on the holy mountain, he gives order to Moses to first construct a gate around the mountain, that the Israelites would not come close by, because if they would be close by, they would be destroyed. So Moses constructs the gate. Then the Lord descends on the holy mountain with smoke, fire, trembling, loud noise. In the Bible says the mountain looked like a furnace. Now, my God, and I am still a believer in God, does not need a gate for protection. God is just here. My God would not need a vehicle in which to descend with smoke and fire and loud noise. This even becomes much clearer later, for example, in the Bible, in the book of Ezekiel, where clearly the prophet describes a vehicle descending from the sky. Of course, I am familiar with the theological answers. They say it's a vision, or Ezekiel saw God sitting on his throne, on his chariot, on a throne. But all this is absolutely not scientific. It's just a question of believing. In my case, it's easier to understand the situation of extraterrestrials than to understand the situation with the omnipotent Almighty God. There is a big controversy, of course, between theology and Erich von Däniken. We use the same sources, the same quotations, but we have different opinions.
Sure. When we talk about the Book of Enoch today, people still are trying to separate this Book of Enoch as a purely biblical resource material, but there's a lot of people focusing on the Book of Enoch now in terms of contact or UFOs in the biblical sense, or And there's a lot of people focusing on the importance now, and I think the Book of Enoch is probably one of these meeting grounds where you have UFO, ancient alien theory, and biblical sources. Perhaps we could talk about the Enochian Bible, the importance.
You see, in the Bible, we read only about 3 phrases about Enoch. It is said that Enoch was the 7th patriarch before the great flood. And the Bible says that Enoch was the first human being who disappeared from our planet in a fiery chariot. That's all what's in the Bible about Enoch. But in Ethiopia, some 170 years back from now, a British, by the way, found in an old Ethiopian convent a book which is written, the Book of Enoch. This book was translated from the Ethiopian language into English, and later from English into German and other languages. The Book of Enoch is sensational because it's the first book where an eyewitness talks. He speaks in the first person. I did, I saw, etc. Now, of course, 170 years ago, our brilliant professors, our linguists, they didn't know nothing about flights, about aircrafts, nothing about space travel, etc. So they tried to translate this Book of Enoch in religious terms. The fact is, Enoch tells that 2 beings descended from the sky. In my interpretation, these 2 beings were 2 extraterrestrials. In the religious interpretation, it says 2 angels descended from the sky. These 2 came close to Enoch. Enoch is afraid, he falls on his ground. He see, they picked me up. I saw the 2 beings which I never saw on earth. They had the breeding, but not the breeding of a man. So they were not human, they were different. Now, one of the 2 beings tells Enoch, a human, you stink terribly, you don't smell well. So Enoch had to go into the water and to wash himself. Now, in the religious interpretation, they say that was the baptism of Enoch. It's all crazy. Before the great flood, there was no baptism. Now, one of the 2 gives Enoch some sort of cream. He should put this cream over his whole body. In my modern eyes, Enoch was simply disinfected. In the eyes of religion interpretation. Enoch was solved to a priest. Forgive my English, I don't know everything. Then someone of the 2 gives Enoch a clothing. Enoch put this clothing on. He looks at himself and say, hey, I look like one of them. In religious interpretation, it said, now he received the clothes of a priest. In my interpretation, no, he received something like a spacesuit. Then they go up into the sky. In my interpretation, he was taken up with the sort of space shuttle to the mother spaceship. In the religious interpretation, they say Enoch goes up to heaven. Up there, Enoch walks into different gardens with different plants which he never saw before. He smells, he sees cowls which he never saw before. In the religious interpretation, they say now Enoch is working through the paradise. In my interpretation, he is simply working in the spaceship to different plantations. Then he comes in a big room. In the center of the big room is a throne. And on the throne is sitting the highest. The religious interpretation says, now Enoch is standing in the highest place before the throne of the Almighty God. In my interpretation, no, he is sitting before the seat of the commander of the spacecraft. Because the highest stands up and welcomes Enoch. A real Almighty God sitting in his throne would never stand up and welcome a human coming into the heaven. So it's all a process of new thinking, of new interpretation. You can interpret everything in the religious sense, but it makes no sense, not any more sense in our days. It's full of contradiction. Our brilliant translators some 160 years ago, they did the best they could, but at that time they believed it must have to do something with God, with their angels. In the meantime, time has changed. We have a new interpretation which is absolutely meaningful, which makes sense.
In that respect, on the angels, let's talk about fallen angels and the Nephilim. Are these guys the ones that try to help mankind to raise their awareness, to raise their education?
First, In the book of Enoch, we have these so-called fallen angels in the religious interpretation. In my eyes, they were extraterrestrials, because Enoch clearly explains that they had sexual contact with the humans. Angels would never have sexual contact with humans. By the way, the same story you can read in the Bible. Just open first book Moses 1:6. When the sons of God, or in some translation, the fallen angels, saw that the daughters of men were beauty, they took them to wife. Which sons of God? Which fallen angel? Something like fallen angels does not exist. In heaven, you see, I was educated as a Catholic, and I was told as a boy, when you live correct, when you don't kill somebody, when you don't cheat, when you are nice, finally, on the death, when you die, you come up into heaven. Heaven is the place of happiness. In heaven, you are close to the Almighty God. But I'm sorry, in the heaven of religion, there is a so-called angel with the name of Lucifer. Lucifer, one day, he comes with his disciples to the throne of the Almighty God and tells him, we do not serve you anymore. Then the archangel Michael is taken to push Lucifer out of heaven. So in that case, heaven is not a place of happiness. Heaven is a place of space, outer space. So we just have to change a few words. Change the word angels into extraterrestrials. Yep. And you change the situation. Change the word of a few humans which had the chance to go into the heaven. Not heaven, they were brought into space. Archangels are some of the leaders of the extraterrestrials, etc. You have to just change about 10 words, and you change the whole content of these old texts.
And you mentioned Lucifer. Lucifer's name actually means bringer of light, is that correct?
In Latin, yes. Lux fare, yes, comes from bringer of light.
The story of Lucifer and bringing of light and the battle in heavens, it's a story that's in other texts and other cultures. The sun god Ra, Tibetan text, the Daizan as well.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about this story getting repeated in different contexts, different circumstances.
For example, in Old Egypt, we have these so-called pyramid texts. And in these pyramid texts, often you find a war in heaven, the war between the gods and the humans. Sometimes the so-called gods, they are described as firing sun discs. Sometimes these gods, they interfere with the humans. They make contact with them. Or in the Indian epos Mahabharata, in the 5th book, which is called the Mausala Purva, there again there is a war in heaven. Arjuna is one of the ones who were taken up there, and he sees with his own eyes that the gods are fighting against each other. He calls them cities in the sky, and 2 of these cities in the sky were destroyed by terrible weapons. So it was not the war in heaven, it was a war in space. Take the Greek mythology, for example. In the Greek mythology, it all starts with Zeus and his son Apollo. But before Zeus comes to our solar system, he had to fight in heaven against Kronos. So in many mythology, they start with the war in heaven. But it was not heaven, it was space.
Wow. Incredible, Eric. Eric, we're talking about gods as well. I mean, let's talk about the Anunnaki for a moment, because all these Anunnaki gods have extremely long lifespans. This is incredible too, and I think Enoch was supposed to have a long lifespan as well, as was Noah and other biblical figures. But with the Anunnaki, let's talk about their lifespans and put that in the picture.
So we have the first 10 patriarchs in the Bible, starting with Adam to Noah. They all have incredible lifespans, many hundred years. Methuselah, for example, was around 900 years. But if you take the so-called Sumerian king list, there again you have the 10 kings before the Great Flood with extremely lifespans. Newest traditions, newest translations now from Palenque. Palenque is Mexico and belongs to the Maya culture. Newest translation now again gives terribly long lifespans of some god. God Pakal, for example, which is part of the tomb of Palenque. God Pakal, according to the newest translation, had many 100,000 years of life. So how is this explainable? We only can speculate about it. I personally don't believe, but what do I know? Nothing. I don't believe that some human were really living more than 700 or 800 years ago. Soon as they are in space, it makes sense. Because when you travel close to the speed of light, and probably they had this possibility, then you have a different time between the Earthlings and the travelers in outer space. So it could be that they were here on Earth, they disappear, they return again to Earth, etc. And all together you have a lifespan of whatever, 900 years and so on.
Pure physics.
Yeah, pure physics. Or the other explanation would be that in reality they did not die because of their medicine, of their knowledge, but we don't know nothing about them.
You mentioned Pakal. We have a replica of the little palenque. If you could just hold that up for the camera.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe talk us through this. This is a very controversial piece of archaeology, this replica. Maybe just talk us through this and the theory of what this tablet is.
Palenque is a place in Mexico, in the Mexican state of Tabasco. And there are different temples and pyramids. One of the temples is called the Temple of Inscription. In 1952, the Mexican archaeologist, Professor Dr. Rus Lullier, he was Mexican and French at the same time, discovered deep under the Temple of Inscription this plate. I mean, the original is 3.8 meter long and 2.2 meter large. So that's a big block of stone. And on this stone block was this chiseling here. Now you see something like a frame going around the thing here. And in the center of the frame, you see a figure bending forward, almost like a racing motorcyclist. He uses his hands to manipulate some controls. He's sitting on a chair, and on the heel of his left foot is something like a pedal. Now he is separated from the room behind him, and at the end, outside of the frame, comes something out like a linking flame. Now what I just explained now is Erich von Däniken's interpretation. Of course, I know all the archaeological interpretations. And in the meantime, since the discovery in 1952, in the archaeological textbooks, we have 14 different interpretations.
Wow.
You see, there is an inscription all around here.
Yep.
And some of these inscriptions we really can read. So we know that the figure really is Pakal. Pakal was the second last ruler of Palenque. Now in the beginning, archaeologists believe that Pakal is sitting here in the open mouth, you look at it like this, in the open mouth of a mythological monster. He's falling into this mythological monster. He's falling to death inside the earth. But outside of his chest comes out the cross of life or the tree of life, etc. The newest interpretation by the professors Stewart and Stewart. They have both the same name because it's the father and the son from the University of Texas. And they are the best, newest interpretation. They say no. Yes, it is Pakal, that's true. But Pakal is not falling into the earth. Pakal is driving out from the earth into the universe. Everything on this plate can be explained in a cosmical matter. So the situation has changed since 1952 and today. And this is just one of the optical indications to support my case.
Wonderful, Eric, wonderful. Let's talk about the Ark of the Covenant. I know some of your peers and colleagues have talked about this and wrote books on it, but your interpretation, this was a technical device as well. You're pretty convinced this was a technical device with, you know, it's one of these artifacts of the Bible that really draws so much mystery and attention.
You see, the Bible is only one source of the Ark of the Covenant. In the Bible, the so-called Lord, the God of the Bible, shows to Moses an original, and Moses must make a copy. In the Bible it clearly says, and Moses do not make any mistake to the original you have seen on the mountain. So Moses constructs this ark, and Moses' brother, Aaron, I don't know how you call it, he was the leader of a new priesthood, and only these priests, the Levites, could go close to the Ark of the Covenant. Anyhow, it's a complicated story. Even in the Bible, in the second book of Samuel, you read that there were some accidents with the Ark of the Covenant. Some priest who touched the Ark and on the wrong place died immediately. Later, They were wars because of the Ark of the Covenant. And it's all a complicated story. Finally, Solomon made a special holy place inside the temple for the Ark of the Covenant. But Solomon had a sexual relationship with the Queen of Sheba. The Queen of Sheba, and he visited her many times, by the way, in a flying chariot. And later they had a son. His son's name was Abimelech. Now, Abimelech, when he was about 18, he visited his father, Solomon, in Jerusalem. And he took the Ark of the Covenant from Jerusalem to today's Ethiopia to help his mother. So, and now today, as we know, parts of the Ark of the Covenant are still in Ethiopia, in the city of Aksum, deep down in the earth, under probably under the cathedral of the Holy Mother, the Virgin Mother Mary. So we have two British explorers, George Sassoon and Rodney Dale. They have come out with a book in which they bring very good indication that the Ark of the Covenant was in reality a miniature reactor. Like today we have plutonium reactors in satellites, because plutonium is not only very dangerous, but it gives a lot of rays, has a lot of force. So it's all complicated. Still today, some rests of the Ark of the Covenant must be somewhere on our planet. And soon as we find these rests, then we can prove definitely, I'm sorry, this is a technological object and it was not a holy object. I'm sorry for my English. I would say all this in my mother language. We cannot do this now. That would be great, because I know a lot about, we could talk about 2 hours about the Ark of Covenant in German language, but not in English.
Eric, wonderful that we're looking at all this evidence, and a lot of people will either ask the question, why on earth would aliens come to planet Earth? And that stops them looking at the evidence we just talked about. But that is an important question. I think we were able to ask that question once we've seen the evidence. In that respect, I know you've looked at all this. Do you have any ideas why they would come to Earth? Was it raw materials, fuel, space station, people?
Well, according to my late friend Zachariah Sitchin, they were coming here for raw material, especially for gold and other raw material. But that's not the only reason, I think. According to some holy writings, including the Bible, the so-called gods created the humans according to their own image. Now we have a theory which was brought to the world some 80 years ago by the Swedish Nobel Prize winner Svante Arrhenius. This theory is called panspermia. According to panspermia, the first civilization spread out some forms of life in a certain sector of the universe, so that evolution would start on planets which are similar than to the one who started this whole story. By the way, concerning planets similar to the Earth, until about 2 years we always believed that our Earth has a special situation in the galaxy. We are not too close to the sun, it's not too hot, we are not too far away, it's not too cold, etc. In the meantime, because of the Hubble telescope, the newest calculation of NASA speak about 4.5 billions of Earth-like planets only in our Milky Way.
Wow.
So there is a lot of it. Now, panspermia, the first intelligent beings started to spread out their forms of life in a way of DNA, for example. You send trillions and trillions out of there. You know exactly that the biggest part will be captured by a sun, another part by other planets, but the small part will be captured by planets which are similar to the one they start. So evolution starts, and we are the copy, we are the offsprings of another extraterrestrial race. Your question was, why have they done it? Of course, they wanted to know how the experiment goes, how we grow up. They wanted to find out how do we develop, because finally we are related somehow together.
A lot of people focus on the Anunnaki being different, although we may look like them, we're smaller than them, and we are replicas, but perhaps there's a giants versus smaller humans. There's many cases of this in many cultures and the biblical sources as well. What do you think about the giants theory, that giants were building megaliths and they were in the Anunnaki? And
that's very well possible. Not only in the Bible, in many of the old mythologies, including the book of Eskimos, including the Mahabharata, it is said that once there were giants on earth. And we have many written examples for the giants. Until today, we have not found a definitely and close anthropological proof. Sometimes bones have been found of big beings, and then the other side, the anthropology said, well, it was the bone of maybe a gigantic gorilla. So we have no conclusive proof that the giants existed. In the literature, yes, but not in the facts. I believe there were giants, and these giants were responsible for some gigantic moving of stones. They had other forces than we. The question is just, why have they done this? Why should they done this? But there is for everything a possible answer.
For sure. Erich, I've just seen the archive of photographs in there, which is incredible. That's an absolute incredible task to have took on. I know from the archive that you have wonderful pictures of Nazca. Let's focus on Nazca, Peru. I know it's a special hot potato for you. This place, like you say, it's not shown on the TV from the archive photos that you have. You're giving a very sanitized version.
You see, Nazca, for me, is a shame how it is shown to the world public. Whenever you see television or scientific books about Nazca, they show you these figures like apes, spiders, monkeys, etc. Or they show you some small lines. Now, in Nazca, we have to differentiate three things. The first things are the figures: apes, monkeys, spiders, etc.
Yeah.
The second thing are small lines. With small lines, I mean about 1 meter wide. But the longest of it is 23 kilometers long.
Wow.
All over hills and mountains. And the third things are the so-called las pistas. They look like airstrips. By the way, I never said that these are airstrips, but they look like airstrips seen from the air. They start abruptly, end abruptly. Sometimes they cross each other. The longest of these so-called airstrips is 3.8 kilometers long. Now, whenever I see pictures in television on Nazca, I get angry. It's crazy. They show figures, they show small lines, they explain how you can do these lines, just crashing away the surface. Of course you can do that. It's crashing away the surface, and then you see a brighter ground, a brighter shining ground than the rest, which has the color of rust and sand, etc. But that's only a few parts of it. In Nazca, we found mountains, mountain tops, which were cut up completely. In no archaeological books that they talk about it. In no television series, you see. I made about 5,000 pictures about Nazca in the early morning and in the evening. And this is incredible. There is absolutely no explanation from the scientific community for the real mystery of Nazca. They only explain the small thing. Now, until about 10 years, we always believed that Nazca is something unique in the world. Only there our ancestors made these lines. By the way, I am of the opinion that our ancestors made it. I never said it's an airport, a prehistoric airport. You see, why should our ancestors do such a thing? Imagine the following situation. We have a mother spaceship around the earth, written by Enoch, written in the Mahabharata, in the 5th book, the Mausara Purva of all ancient. From the mother spaceship, they send smaller vehicles out to our planet. Of course, first they make measurement. A mother spaceship is maybe for hundreds of years on the way, so they need some sort of energy. They measure from the mother spaceship where on this new detected planet we find energy. Whatever the energy is, it could be uranium, it could be some kind of minerals, whatever. They find in Nazca, there we will find some energy. And there are no people in Nazca, so we not destroy or kill everybody. Now they send down from the mother spaceship a small vehicle, maybe an unmanned vehicle, just some sort of robot to make some measurement. That's all. This unmanned vehicle comes down, close to the plain of Nazca, comes to a standstill, and then slowly comes down on the ground. And because it comes down on the ground, it trashes stones and sand away, and a small line appears in the ground. Now, they make their measurement, they disappear again. And 2 or 3 natives have watched this. They saw something coming down from the sky, and it left a trace on the planet. Mm-hmm. Now they say the gods were here. These incredible beings from there were here. Look, they left a tray, a line on the ground. That's what the gods want. They want that we make lines for them. So the natives start to make lines, small lines, large lines, thick lines, and lines to all kinds of directions. They are waiting for the gods to return. Of course, the gods do not return, and after some days, some priest may have a good idea. Priests always have good ideas, and he says, we must show them up there that we have offerings from them. Now they start to scratch some animals of all kinds in the ground. That was my basic story of Nazca. Now, since 10 years, we know that Nazca is not unique in the world. In the meantime, we have found gigantic signs in the ground in Saudi Arabia, in Jordania, in Russia, near the Aral Lake, in South Africa, and different times, and always gigantic lines and figures made of in such an oversized way that you can see them only from the air. Scientists today are still looking at Nazca, very narrow. They don't compare it with the other places around the world, which is wrong. We should collect it all together and make a new picture out of it.
Erich, take a moment and just show the audience your latest book there, Remnants of the Gods.
You see, that was Chariots of the Gods.
That was the first one.
That it all started. By the way, the manuscript of Chariots of the Gods was already finished in 1966. And what nobody knows, especially not in the English world, long before 1966, I have written articles, when I was manager of a hotel, articles about this theme. In Canada, there was, maybe still is, I don't know, a newspaper in German language. It is called Der Nordwesten, the Northwest. It appears in Winnipeg. And on December 8, 1964, long before Chariot, I had a double page in there. The headline was, were our ancestors visited by extraterrestrials? Of course, in German language. So that's a long time ago. In 1968, the book appeared on the market in the German language. In the meantime, more than 45 years have passed.
45 years.
More than 45 years have passed. I have become an old fellow, and that's the latest title in the English language, The Remnants of the Gods. And as long as I live, in the meantime, I'm 80, I will never stop. I will continue, and I am very grateful and thankful to whatever it is, the gods, that my brain functions.
Wow. Well, Erich, you did leave a legacy for other researchers out there, and other researchers have took this on. What would you say to anybody out there investigating the ancient alien theory? What advice would you give to other researchers?
First, we need some professors or doctors in old languages. I would say to young people who are intelligent, please learn, for example, Sumerian cuneiforms. Learn Egyptian hieroglyphs, learn. And only when you have this knowledge, go and make new translations with our modern knowledge to these old texts. And the result would be different to the translations of yesterday. Then the second thing is, use your eyes in archaeology. I have to explain this. We have a Christian culture, and the Christian culture has a lot of wonderful churches in the world. We have a lot of main altars, side altar. We have paintings up there. We see Jesus going up, descending to heaven, etc. Now, all these architects, all these painters, all these artists who made something wonderful for our Christian culture were not eyewitnesses when Jesus Christ died. They were not there 2,000 years ago in Jerusalem. They were just coming artists because of tradition. The same thing happened with extraterrestrials. Some extraterrestrials were here some thousands of years ago. The humans who saw them were completely fascinated, infected by it. Like Christianity, the story went around the world. The gods were here. And now artists start to chisel sculptures. They start to make paintings. Now I ask for the new archaeologists, the young generation, go out, like we do it in the Christian culture, and seek for the descending gods, for the gods with masks, with halos, with helmets, the one who clearly descend from heaven, etc. So we need a new perspective, new eyes in archaeology. The temples are already there. That's what I do, by the way, in all my books. I always try to find sculptures, figures, paintings, stone age paintings, etc., and interpret it with my hypothesis. It's not the way that I have to be right. Maybe the other opinion is correct, but please compare it with today's knowledge. We have a different result.
I'm glad you mentioned the cave paintings there. I think that's another great area of research that you do. That seems to be all these cave paintings are artists. We're all doing the same thing, painting similar pictures.
And this worldwide. You see, in the Sahara Desert, in the today's state of Algeria, in the Tassili Mountains, there are two paintings which the archaeologist who discovered it was Mr. Henri Laude, a Frenchman, long time ago, 1958. He spontaneously named it the Great Martian God. Now this figure in original is 6 meters high on the cave wall.
Wow.
That means in practice the painter, the artist, they had to construct something to make it on the wall. They themselves are not 6 meters tall. So it was very, very impressive.
Wow.
You see this gigantic being in a real sort of space suit with a gigantic helmet on it. It's absolutely great. But all over the world, our ancestors have chiseled different cave paintings. Normally they always chiseled our hand. They chiseled all kinds of animals. And soon as they chiseled the gods, it was always the one with helmets, with halos around their head. I have thousands of pictures from all over the world. All the gods were the one with lightning, bright shining, etc. Or with the wings, for example. Like today we paint angels.
Wow. Erich, you're a very passionate guy. Nobody will ever take that from you. But if you were to sit down today to write Chariots of the God again, what would you do differently? Would you do anything differently?
In the meantime, of course, I'm a little cleverer than at that time. When I was young, when I wrote Chariots of the Gods, I was absolutely not critical, not self-critical towards myself. And of course, as a young man, you believed everything, even if it was nonsense, etc. So in Chariots of the Gods, there are quite some mistakes and a few things are wrong, which I know later. But when I made Chariots of the Gods, I was enthusiastic. I did not realize that these things were wrong. In the meantime, with my knowledge, I would of course avoid everything which is wrong. For example, in Chariots of the Gods, I describe an iron pillar. This iron pillar stands in a temple in Delhi, India. I was there, of course. I was there and I made wonderful pictures. And the people there told me that this iron column is over 700 years old and it does not rust. So in Chariots of the Gods, I speculated, well, it does not rust since hundreds of years. Maybe or probably it's an extraterrestrial mixture. In the meantime, this damn piece is rusting. So what can you do? Oh, when I was young, I was 19 years old. I was for the first time in Egypt. I was up there in Aswan, and our guide, by the way, was an academic guide, and I was not part of a group. We were just 2 young people. This academic guy told us there is an island called Elephantine. And Elephantine has the word Elephantine because seen from the air, it has the shape of an elephant.
Wow. So
I wrote this in Chariots of the God. 1 year later, I realized this is all nonsense. The shape of the Elephantine Island is not like an elephant. It's not because of seen from the air. The name Elephantine simply becomes because real elephants were on this island some thousands of years ago. So there are a few things which I, of course, with my today's knowledge, I would never repeat. I would do better. But time has changed. In the meantime, I'm nearly 80. Okay.
Erich, I know you wrote about Nan Madol before. For me, Nan Madol is one of the biggest mysteries on this planet, and very few writers tackle it because they don't know how to address it. Academics don't even have any idea about Nan Madol. for the posterity of the listeners, tell us a little bit about Nan Madol, its location, and the wonder of it.
Nobody goes to Nan Madol.
So,
I don't even know if they have an airstrip in the meantime. When I was there some 40 years ago, we had first to fly to Guam. Guam is a little island in the Pacific Ocean, and there is American Air Force is there. And from Guam, you fly to a very little aircraft, which is called Nan Madol, and there you have to take a ship. So, and
Wow.
Nan Madol has different little islands, and on one of these islands there are ruins, gigantic ruins. They are made out of basalt, blocks of basalt, and they are put one next to each other for 8 meters high. Altogether, more than 600,000 of these basalt columns have been used for Nan Madol, for the construction of Nan Madol. Nobody knows what this ruin should be. There is only legends, always legends, always legends. In a deep, deep past, there was a god coming down from the sky, of course. On many South Sea islands, you have these legends that some gods come down from the sky. And the gods was reigning there. He was living there. And the people constructed these gigantic ruins for his security. Not only for the security against human adversaries, no. It was the ocean, the waves, the wind, and the storm to be protected.
I mention that, Erich, because there's not many people have gone to the four corners of the earth like you have. There's a lot of people will go to Peru and Bolivia and chase mysteries there, but Nan Madol is so remote. This is the legacy of what you've done. You've put these places on the map as such. And to come back to South America, Bolivia again, we have to mention Bolivia. Pumapunku. What an incredible place.
Well, I don't know. Whenever I write something, I want to see it first. I want to touch it. I want to smell it. And before I write, I want to know the archaeological literature about it. So I know exactly what the scientific community says about it, if they say something about it. And I come only later, when I have smelled it, touched it, seen it, etc., with my story. So this Pumapunku is 4,000 meters high in today's Bolivia. Well, a few kilometers away from the lake of Titicaca. Now, Pumapunku, by archaeologists, they say it's simply a temple, because near to Pumapunku, you have the gigantic temple of Tiahuanaco. Tiahuanaco is really made by the humans. Now, in Pumapunku, you find stone blocks, absolutely polished, and they are made out of granite. Granite is a very, very hard material. To cut granite, you need material which is harder than granite. And some of these stone blocks are 80 tons, 70 tons. They were moved, and other stone blocks are still laying around there. They have small grooves in it. Grooves in the stone block, up, down. Grooves which you cannot chisel with Stone Age tools, because every Stone Age tool has the form, the shape of this. So when you make a groove, you always cut the upside. But if you use a modern, I don't have the word in it, machining, then you can cut the groove out as it is in Pumapunku.
Incredible.
So now, of course, again, I'm familiar with the mythology. I read the Spanish chronicles, what they said about this. And around 450 years ago, the first Spanish people were up there. They were standing before these ruins of Pumapunku. The natives were with them. And the Spanish asked them, what is this? Not even we Spanish people could move or cut these blocks in such a way. And the native says, the gods made this in one night. So I ask myself, the gods made this in one night? Wow. Normally, a tribe is proud of their working. Normally they are, well, proudly, we did it. Our ancestors did it. Sure. In that case, they said, no, the gods did it. Now I have an idea. Some extraterrestrials, again, descend from their mother spaceship. On the planet Earth, of course, they need smaller vehicles, like our astronauts went into the moon. You start from the Earth with the Saturn V, gigantic rocket.
Sure.
Then only a small part of the Saturn V reaches the orbit of the moon. And from the orbit of the moon, they take a smaller vehicle. It's called LAME, Lunar Module, who descends on the surface of the moon. Out of the lunar module, again a smaller vehicle, the so-called moon car, comes out, like here. from the other spaceship, some space
Smaller,
shuttle,
smaller,
whatever,
smaller.
smaller, coming down to, and then on the planet Earth, they use some little
Small vehicle.
vehicles like this. Now, today our mountain scrappers, they always use a basic camp. You have your tools on the back, on your rucksack. You don't want to take everything on the top of Himalaya. So you need the basic camps. These astronauts also, they use the basic camp because their tools, their technology was too heavy. They don't want to move everything all the time around. So in one night, they cut with their tools, the granite blocks. They made some sort of deposit against the wild animals, against the humans, etc. They studied the tribe up there in Pumapuku. They learned the language. They instructed them a little in astronomy. One day they disappeared with the promise we will return in the far future. Now, after they disappeared, the natives come up to Pumapunku. They see these polished cut stones and they always whisper, the gods made them. Now the natives start, in honor of the gods, to construct a temple, the temple of Tiahuanacu. So you have two cases to differentiate up there. We have a technology which is not human, because you can prove it in the cutting, in the gigantic platforms, in the weight, and you have a human technology which you can prove that was done by our forefathers.
Wow. Eric, we've talked about ancient spacecrafts and spaceports, and we do also have examples of submarines, perhaps Jonas and the submarine.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe mention that as well. It's not just in the air.
You see, the Jonah story is known in the Bible, but not only in the Bible. There are old Jewish texts which normally no one knows. And in one of these old Jewish texts, you read that Jonas was sitting on the shore, and then a gigantic fish, if you wish, comes out of the waves, a submarine, and they asked Jonas if he wished to join them. He went into the submarine because he describes that there were some windows and he could see out of the windows the fishes and everything what happened under the sea.
Wow.
Because they had their lightning, and after a few days they brought him out on the same shore. So according to this old Jewish text, it was a submarine, it was not a whale.
Wow. Eric, incredible information. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. What's new for you now, Eric? Are you still writing?
Actually, what?
What's new for you now? Are you still writing books?
It's a never-ending story. I know in number 36 with writing, and it's, you see, because of my international success with the books, so many people worldwide write me. They tell me, Mr. von Däniken, don't you know about the cave paintings near to my home place? I write back, now I know nothing, can you send us photographs?
Wow.
Is there a scientific literature? What do your local archaeologists say again? So more and more things comes together. And then I go there sooner or later. Of course, I always want to see it and touch it. So it never ends. And in our modern time, you see, when I wrote Chariots of the Gods, I speculated that we were visited by beings from outer space. The critics at that time said, this is ridiculous because the stars, between one star and another, you have light years. The next star, Alpha Centauri, more or less 4 light years, Sirius, etc. So you cannot reach these stars. So the scientific literature of today say, oh yes, we can reach the stars. And we see possibilities how to make it. Or in Chariots of the Gods, I was speculating that we, the human race, we are the product of an artificial mutation. The critics say this is all bullshit, because that would mean that we have to change something in our cell. At that time, when I published Chariots of the God, DNA code was not discovered at that time. In the meantime, we know that it works. In the meantime, we know we are able to change the DNA code. We are able to construct a mixed creature, a chimere, or so we say. So in Chariots of the Gods are a lot of things which I predicted. In the meantime, they are here. You ask what is coming. I always watch the newest discoveries, be it in archaeology, be it in mythology, because new translations are made. Of course, in scientific, like genetics, etc. And then I have old mysteries, and I put them together. One example, like you can cut this all out. That's right. There was the Dead Sea Scrolls. Some 50 years ago they found Dead Sea Scrolls.
Sure.
And among these Dead Sea Scrolls was one which is called the Lamech Scroll.
Lamech.
What is Lamech? Lamech was a shepherd, and he was obviously a rich shepherd because he had hundreds and hundreds of animals. He always worked around there where the animals had some feed, some green grass. One day he returned to his home tents, and his wife, her name was Batenosh, had just given birth to a child. And Lamech comes at home and he sees the child. The child was a boy. And Lamech said to his wife Batenosh, "This is not my child, because I was away too many months. And if I look at this boy, he looks differently to me. Has not the same skin, the same eyes, etc." But Batenosh swears to everything which is holy for her that no one touched her sexually. She even says, "Oh, Father Lamech, I promise you, no one other shepherd, no one soldiers, nobody touched me. But there is the boy." So Lamech goes to his own father, which is Methuselah in the Bible. He tells them the family story. Methuselah doesn't have an answer either. He goes to his father, which is no one else than Enoch. The same Enoch which disappears later in the fiery channel. Enoch says to his son Methuselah, "Go to your son Lamech. Tell him that the guardians of the sky have inseminated Batenosh, the lady, without touching her sexually, because the guardians of the sky would destroy the human race at that time, because they are developing in a wrong way. Lamech should accept the boy as his own, because the boy would be the survivor of the great flood." Now we are all descendants of Noah. So we are descendants of the artificial mutation,
For sure.
artificial insemination.
Incredible, Eric. Eric, one final question, and this is kind of tying what you just said about new discoveries. I guess the biggest recent discovery in the early 90s was Göbekli Tepe.
Yeah.
What a fascinating place, because had you not have wrote the books before Göbekli Tepe, the paradigm and all the writers like Hancock and Boval, Andrew Collins, all the great researchers on mysteries and history that have blossomed in the last so many years. If that era wasn't there, Göbekli Tepe might have been brushed away up under the carpet. And now that the platform was there, maybe just wrap up on Göbekli Tepe, and some people now say it's almost similar to Easter Island in a way, in some place.
Concerning Göbekli Tepe, I have not much to say because I was never there. I tried in the last 2 years to go there, but it's always complicated because the political situation of war. Of course, I met Graham Hancock and other of my colleagues who have written about Göbekli Tepe. The first thing is the age. It's terribly old, more than 8,000, 9,000 years old. So it contradicts, so to say, evolution. There was a society there who was able to measure, to move this stone block. And the question for me is always, why exactly there? What is so important on this geographical place, Göbekli Tepe? Now, the birthplace of Abraham was a few kilometers away from Göbekli Tepe.
Wow.
And Abraham, again, is part of my knowledge, because there is in the old Jewish literature a text called the Abraham Apocryphic, which nobody knows. Again, Abraham is sitting down there when two beings from the clouds descend. And he clearly say they were not human beings, like Enoch says it before.
Wow.
So they were not human beings. These two beings take him up to the sky. Abraham describes what it happened. They took me up into the heaven over the earth. And he says, when I was up there, I wished to fall down to the earth. The holy place we were always moved around its own axis. Once I saw the earth up, and then I saw the stars down. Now soon as you are in a mother spaceship orbiting around the earth, this mother spaceship will always turn around its own axis, because by doing this, you create a centrifugal force. Centrifugal force is an artificial gravity. So nobody could have known then this. They brought Abraham down. Now Abraham's birthplace and home place is maybe about 12 kilometers away from Göbekli Tepe. Maybe because of Abraham, they wanted to create something that the gods descend again. That's just a speculation. but I know that Abraham's birthplace was very close to today's Göbekli Tepe. What a word.
Wow. Erich, absolute pleasure talking to you today. Incredible information. Of course, we'll link up the websites in the YouTube description. But for now, Erich, I really, really thank you for your time. It's been awesome.
It's a pleasure to talk to you. I hope one day I come back to England and give some published lectures again. I have incredible pictures in my archive, and I have incredible computer animations which are not known in your country.
Oh, thank you very
much. For next time, thank you very much.
This is incredible, Erich.
These are all books of Erich von Däniken in different languages. The newest translations are now in Chinese languages. I'm very proud of it, that finally the population of China is able to read our story, the ancient astronaut story.
Wow.
In the meantime, we have 32 translations worldwide.
That's incredible, Erich.
But to explain one thing at the same sequence, I never have become a rich man. No. Everybody thinks 100,000 of millions of books, he must be very, very, it's all garbage. Every year, of course, I made 200, 300,000 Swiss francs, but every year I spend the money again. So I have my expeditions, I have my archive, I have my people who work with me. Money comes in, and money goes 100 continuation, incredible. With many of them, or some of them, I'm not, I don't agree with them. There's a lot of things in there which is, I have not said, but others are beautiful. Look this here.
What is this, Erich?
So, in Arizona, United States, there's a tribe living Hopi or Hopi Indians, and they make these figures. Some of them are small, others are big, and they are called kachinas. What is a kachina? According to the Hopi tradition, the kachinas were the teachers from heaven. They descended long, long time ago to the forefathers of the Hopi, and they teach them in astronomy and all kind of science. They disappeared, of course, with the promise to return one day. And since that day, the Hopis produce these dolls. You can, tourists can buy them. Different colors, but it's all kachinas, the teachers from heaven.
Wenn Ihnen dieses Video gefallen hat, geben Sie gern einen Daumen nach oben, teilen Sie das Video und schreiben Sie einen Kommentar. Bleiben Sie neugierig. Unterstützen Sie, wir sind nicht allein, mit einer Spende via PayPal. Vielen Dank.